Welcome to the Daily Brain. The word today is confluence. It is defined as a coming or flowing together, meeting, or gathering at one point. Now let's explore and truly understand the complete concept.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
It's great to be back.
So today we're going to be looking at the word confluence.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, it's, at first glance you think rivers, right?
Right.
Like the coming together of rivers. But we've got some sources here, vocabulary.com, Merriam-Webster, even an article from Psychology Today that are going to show us that it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, me too. So let's start with maybe just the most basic definition from vocabulary.com. They say confluence is a flowing together, and they use the example of Pittsburgh where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet.
Classic example, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like that's the first thing you think of, I think.
Yeah, it's a really vivid image, right? Two separate rivers becoming one. But the thing is, it goes way beyond just like physical geography.
It does. Because even vocabulary.com, they give this other example of a drama club and senior class needing each other, like a confluence of factors, they say.
Yeah, and that gets at something really interesting about confluence. It's not just things existing next to each other, right? It's about them interacting and creating something new, like ingredients in a recipe, you know?
Yeah, so there's a kind of a synergy happening there. Okay, so Merriam-Webster, they also define confluence as a gathering or meeting, and they give the example of Santa Fe, New Mexico, as a confluence of Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo cultures.
Yeah, that's a great example of cultural confluence. All these different traditions and languages and values all intersecting in one place. I wonder how those cultures blend or maybe clash sometimes. Or do they coexist in some kind of tension?
Yeah, it makes you think about, other examples around the world and how those interactions have shaped societies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but okay, so before we go too far down that road, Merriam-Webster, they also have this definition of confluency related to cell biology, talking about how much of a surface cells cover, which is a little unexpected, I have to say.
It is, yeah, a little surprising, but it shows how this idea of confluence, of things coming together, it happens on so many different levels, from rivers to cultures now to like the microscopic world of cells.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. So it's like those rivers in Pittsburgh, but instead of water, it's cells kind of merging to cover a surface.
Right. And it just shows you how this concept of confluence, it's kind of fundamental to life itself. It's happening everywhere all the time.
It's pretty wild when you think about it like that. Okay, so we've gone from rivers to cells, but let's bring it back to like human experience a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This Psychology Today article by Bernard de Koven, he focuses on confluence as like a social phenomenon. He says it's the we in our interactions, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it's a powerful idea, right? Yeah. That we is more than just being in the same place. It's about connecting on a deeper level, like a shared flow state, de Koven calls it.
So what is he talking about with flow state, though? And why is this whole we thing, why is that so important?
Well, he uses flow state to describe those moments when we feel totally in sync with others. Like when you're making music together or dancing or playing a sport and everyone's kind of in the zone. There's this shared energy, this sense of purpose, like you're part of something bigger.
I could definitely relate to that. It's an amazing feeling when everyone's on the same wavelength. But I guess I'm still not clear on why recognizing that we is so important. Like, what are the implications of that?
I think what de Koven is saying is that this we isn't just a nice feeling. It's actually essential to who we are as humans. We have this deep-seated need for connection and belonging. It shapes how we behave, how we relate to each other, and even how we see ourselves in the world.
Okay, so it's not just about fleeting moments of connection, but more like a deeper understanding of how we're all interconnected, right?
Exactly.
But there's this thing that de Koven says that I found kind of surprising. He says that structured environments can actually enhance confluence. Which seems counterintuitive, right? Like, wouldn't rules and limitations actually stifle connection?
It does seem like a paradox, doesn't it? But his argument is actually really compelling. He uses examples like theaters, sports arenas, even courtrooms to make his point.
Okay, but how does that work, though? I mean, take a courtroom. It seems like the very nature of a courtroom is adversarial, with opposing sides battling it out. Where's the confluence in that?
Well, think about it this way. Even though courtrooms can be adversarial, there's also this shared understanding of the rules and procedures and the ultimate goal, which is to seek justice. So everyone involved, the judge, the lawyers, the jury, they're all bound by this structure, and that creates a very unique kind of confluence. It might not always be harmonious, but it's a great example of how structure can facilitate interaction.
I guess I never thought about it like that before. But I'm still trying to reconcile this idea of structure-enhancing connection. Couldn't you argue that too much structure can stifle creativity and individuality and lead to a more superficial kind of connection?
That's a valid point for sure. I mean, there's definitely a balance to be struck. Too much rigidity can be stifling. But what de Koven is talking about isn't about blindly following rules. It's about recognizing that certain structures can actually create the conditions for deeper, more meaningful connection.
Okay, so it's not about the structure itself, but how it's used to foster a sense of purpose and shared understanding.
Exactly.
But if structure can enhance confluence, can the absence of structure, or like the presence of chaos, hinder it?
That's a great question, and it leads us to some of the more challenging aspects of confluence. De Koven does highlight all the positive potential, but he doesn't shy away from the downsides either.
So he acknowledges that there can be like a dark side to this force.
Exactly. He even uses examples like riots and military training.
Okay, so it's a little sobering. But I guess it makes sense. Confluence is about people coming together. But the nature of that coming together can vary widely, right? A celebratory gathering can have a very different energy than a mob, even though both involve a merging of individuals.
Precisely. And I think that's why de Koven is careful not to romanticize confluence. It's not inherently good or bad. It's just a force.
So it's neutral.
Right. And what matters is the context, the intentions behind it and the choices people make within that shared experience.
So we're seeing that confluence can be a double-edged sword. It can bring people together in a positive way, but it can also be harnessed for, well, less desirable ends.
Absolutely. And I think recognizing that duality is really important because it helps us to be more critical thinkers about our social interactions. If we don't understand the potential pitfalls of confluence, we might be more easily swept along by group dynamics, whether they're positive or negative.
That's a good point. Okay, so I'm definitely seeing confluence in a whole new light now. It's more than just rivers or even people coming together. It's this force that can be powerful and complex. So where do we go from here? Like, what does this mean for us in our everyday lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think what de Koven is getting at is that we need to become more aware of the forces that shape our social experiences. Where do we feel that sense of we, that shared energy and purpose? And how can we use this understanding of confluence to create more positive, more meaningful interactions in our own lives?
It's a great question, and it makes me think about those times when I've felt really connected to others. Like family gatherings, even though they can be a little crazy sometimes, there's often this feeling of shared history, of belonging, especially during the holidays.
Absolutely. Family gatherings are a classic example of confluence, aren't they? Even if there's disagreements or tension, there's still this sense of shared identity and history that binds people together. But family isn't the only place where we experience this, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that too, like in work collaborations. When a team is really clicking, there's this energy that emerges of like everyone's working in sync towards a common goal. You kind of become this single unit, striving for something bigger than any one individual could achieve on their own.
I love that description. It really captures the essence of confluence in a work setting. It shows how this principle can be used to get things done, It's not just about feel-good moments. It's about using that collective energy to accomplish something great.
Yeah, it's like that saying the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But I'm also thinking about online communities. Like I'm part of a few groups for hobbies, and it's amazing how quickly you can feel a sense of belonging even though you've never met these people face to face.
That's such a great example, and it really challenges the idea that we need to be physically together to experience confluence. The internet has opened up all these new ways for people to connect and create that sense of we-e, but it also raises some questions, doesn't it?
For sure. If technology can facilitate confluence, can it also be used to manipulate or exploit it? Like we're seeing with the spread of misinformation and echo chambers online, it seems like the same forces that bring people together can also be used to divide and polarize.
That's a really crucial point, and it brings us back to the idea that confluence is neutral. It can be used for good or bad, and in the digital age where information is constantly flowing and algorithms can shape what we see and hear, It's more important than ever to be aware of the potential downsides of confluence.
So it's not just about understanding how confluence works, but also about using that knowledge ethically and responsibly.
Right, and I think we can think about it like this. We're all tributaries flowing into this larger river, and the quality of that river depends on what each of us brings to the confluence.
Wow, I love that analogy. It really captures the interconnectedness of it all and also the responsibility.
Exactly.
So it feels like understanding confluence can be both empowering and humbling. It's empowering because it suggests that we can actively shape our social reality, but humbling because it reminds us that we're just one part of something much larger than ourselves.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. And I think that's really what DeKoven is trying to get across. Confluence isn't just this abstract concept. It's a force that's shaping our lives every single day, from our relationships to the evolution of cultures and ideas. And by understanding it better, we can make more conscious choices about how we participate in this whole dance of connection and interaction.
So as we continue this deep dive, it seems like we need to explore not only the mechanics of confluence, but also like the ethical implications, the potential for good and bad.
Definitely.
It's a fascinating topic, and I'm already feeling like I'm seeing the world in a whole new light.
Me too. And that's the beauty of exploring a concept like this. It challenges our assumptions, it expands our perspectives, and it encourages us to be more conscious and intentional participants in our own lives and the world around us. But in those negative examples, like riots or military training, it's almost like confluence is being manipulated, like there's a deliberate attempt to override individual choice and create this kind of hive mind.
So it sounds like confluence can be used for good or for bad, depending on who's in charge and what their goals are.
Exactly, yeah. Think about the structure of military training, for example. It's designed to break down individual identities and create unquestioning loyalty to the group, which, I mean, in a military context, that can be very effective. You need that conformity and obedience. But it can also lead to dehumanization, loss of a moral compass, you know?
That is a chilling thought. And it makes me think about other examples where confluence is maybe used in harmful ways, like, I don't know, cults, extremist groups. It seems like they also exploit this need to belong, create this kind of distorted we to manipulate people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Cults are a perfect example of how confluence can be twisted, you know? To serve a leader or an ideology, they use all these techniques like isolation, love bombing, thought reform, all designed to break down an individual's ability to think critically and make them dependent on the group. The we becomes all about control, not genuine connection.
So it sounds like there's a spectrum of confluence, right? On one end, you have the healthy, positive forms, and on the other end, it's more toxic and manipulative, and sometimes it's hard to tell where the line is.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And it really highlights how important it is to be able to think critically about group dynamics. Just because people are coming together and feeling unified doesn't mean it's healthy, you know?
Right. So how can we be more aware of these potential downsides? What are some things to watch out for?
Well, one key indicator is if there's pressure to conform, if you're being coerced. In healthy groups, there's respect for different opinions and people are willing to have open discussions. But in more manipulative groups, there's this suppression of dissent and a demand for loyalty no matter what.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, is it genuine enthusiasm or are you being forced to comply? But what about the situations where people are willingly participating in something harmful, like joining a riot or an extremist group? It's not always about being coerced, is it?
No, you're right. It's not. Sometimes people are drawn to these groups because they're looking for something they feel like they're missing in their own lives. A sense of belonging, purpose. Maybe they feel alienated or lost. And these groups offer a sense of community, a clear set of beliefs, you know? It can be very seductive.
So it's like almost a twisted version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know? The need for belonging and self-esteem is being met, but in a way that ultimately leads to harmful outcomes.
That's a very astute observation, and it underlines how important it is to address those needs in healthy ways. When people feel connected and valued and empowered, they're much less likely to be drawn to extremist ideologies or mob mentality.
So it's not just about recognizing the negative side of confluence, but also about creating the conditions for positive confluence to thrive.
Exactly. If we want to use the power of confluence for good, we need to foster environments where individuals feel safe, respected, empowered to be themselves. Encourage critical thinking, promote dialogue, create opportunities for people to connect with others who share their values.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty big challenge. but also really inspiring. Like,
Mm.
we can actually shape how confluence plays out, guided toward outcomes that benefit everyone.
I agree, and it starts with awareness. By understanding the dynamics of confluence, both good and bad, we can become more conscious in how we create our social reality.
This is all really interesting, but I gotta be honest, I'm still trying to figure out how to apply all this to my own life. Like, what can I actually do? What are some concrete steps I can take to encourage positive confluence?
That's a great question, and it's something that we're going to be exploring in a lot more detail in the next part of our deep dive. But for now, I think it's helpful to just think about your own experiences with confluence. Where have you felt that sense of we, that shared energy? What were the circumstances? What made those moments special?
That's a good point. Like, looking back at those experiences might give us some clues about how to create more of them moving forward. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing those practical steps we can take to build more positive confluence in our own lives.
Me too. It's going to be good.
Okay, so we're back and ready to kind of wrap things up. This deep dive into confluence has been, I don't know, pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
We've gone from like rivers and cells all the way to, human connection and all the complexities. I gotta say, I'm feeling maybe a little overwhelmed, but in a good way. Like, my mind is kind of blown wide open.
I know exactly what you mean. Once you start seeing confluence, you realize it really is everywhere, and it's so powerful, It can shape our experiences in so many ways.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I'm really interested in the more practical side of things. You mentioned some like actual steps we can take to encourage that positive side of confluence in our lives.
Right. Well, remember how we talked about being intentional? That's really the key, making a conscious effort to look for and create opportunities for connection, collaboration, those shared experiences. It starts with noticing those moments when you feel that spark of confluence.
So like those times when you're really in sync with others, working together toward a common goal, or even just like understanding each other.
Exactly. And then you can start to break it down. What made that experience so special? What were the conditions that allowed that confluence to happen?
Okay, so kind of use those positive experiences as a model for creating more.
Yeah, exactly. If you notice you do really well in collaborative work environments, maybe seek out more team projects or volunteer opportunities where you can work with others. Or if you're part of an online community that feels really great, see if there are other groups with similar interests you can join.
That makes sense. But what about situations where we don't have as much control? Like family gatherings or a job where it's not really set up for that kind of connection.
Well, that's where those other elements we talked about come in, like building trust, making sure there's open communication, embracing diversity, and really trying to find that common ground. Sometimes you have to put in some effort.
So being proactive, even when it's not the easiest.
Right, bringing that awareness of confluence to all your interactions, whether you're just chatting with someone you don't know or you're having a disagreement with a family member. Remembering that even in those moments where there's conflict, you can still find common ground, connect on a deeper level.
I like that. It's like a reminder that confluence isn't just about those feel-good moments, but also about how we handle those more challenging interactions. But I'm also curious about the role of structure in all of this. We said it can be good or bad for confluence. So how do we find that balance between being too rigid and too chaotic?
That's a really good question. I think it comes down to the intention behind the structure. If it's about control, suppressing individuality, forcing people to conform, that's probably going to stifle confluence. But if it's about safety, about creating clear expectations or making it easier to collaborate, then it can really boost connection and creativity.
So it's about making sure the structure is actually serving a positive purpose.
Yes, exactly. Think about a well-run team meeting. You have an agenda, time limits for each item, a facilitator to keep things moving. It might seem kind of rigid, but it actually allows everyone to share their ideas, work through disagreements, and make decisions efficiently.
I see what you mean. It's like a container for all that energy, guiding it in the right direction.
Exactly. But of course, sometimes there isn't a structure already in place.
Right. So how do you create one that supports positive confluence?
That's where it gets really interesting. You have to get a little creative, maybe set some ground rules, define a shared purpose, figure out how decisions will be made. It could even be as simple as just agreeing to meet regularly to talk about something you're all interested in.
So it's about taking charge and building a structure that works for the specific people involved.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing thing. The structure might need to change as the group changes. It's about finding that sweet spot between support and freedom.
It sounds like there's a real art to cultivating confluence. It's not always straightforward. You need to be intentional, but also flexible. Be a leader sometimes, a follower at other times.
It's true, but it's a really rewarding process. When you create those spaces where confluence can happen, you open up so many possibilities for creativity, for innovation, for positive change in the world.
Okay, so to sum up this whole deep dive, it seems like confluence is a lot bigger than we might have thought. It's shaping our cultures, relationships, even our biology.
And the best part is we can actually work with it, use it to our advantage.
But it takes effort. We have to be mindful, intentional, and willing to lean into those challenges and rewards of connecting with other people.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So that brings us to the end of our deep dive. I hope everyone listening found this as thought-provoking as we did.
And don't stop here, you know. Keep exploring, keep connecting with others, keep looking for those moments of confluence in your own life. You never know what amazing things you might find.
Absolutely. And as always, we've got links to everything we talked about in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. Until next time, keep diving deep.